Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ, the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be doing our second video in a series entitled Red to Blue, in which we analyze states that were once reliably Republican states, flip, and now are solidly in the Democratic column. And today's video is going to be about the Centennial state of Colorado. So the map on the screen is the summary of the 2020 and 2016 election maps by county. The counties that are in red, of course, are counties that are reliably Republican, and the counties that are in blue are either safe or reliably Democratic or leaning Democratic counties. So as of the 2020 election, there are 39 lean likely or safe Republican counties in the state of Colorado, 22 of the same in the Democratic camp, and 4 of those that are completely swing counties. These are counties that could go to either party in a presidential election. We're going to skip back to the year 2000. This is the summary of the results from 2000 and 2004. As you can see, there's a massive difference here. There are 42 safe, lean, or likely Republican counties. The contrast, however, is there is just 12 Democratic counties as opposed to 22. And that's because there are nearly 10 swing counties, most of which either swing or leaning Republican are in the Denver metro area. This is by far the most populous area in Colorado. If we go to today's results, this entire region, the most populous part of Colorado, is safe Democratic, and we're going to go through the specific results in a minute. But all of these counties that are big vote baskets for presidential candidates are breaking heavily in favor of Democrats. And though Colorado is a majority independent state, registered Democrats outweigh registered Republicans by quite a bit now. That wasn't the case 10 or 20 years ago. If we go back to the 2020 election in Colorado, Donald Trump was walloped in the state. He lost the state by 13.5 percentage points, and he lost it mainly because of his extremely poor performance in the most populous counties in Colorado, and that is the Denver metro area. Places like Adams County, Arapahoe County, Jefferson County, Fort Collins, Boulder, of course, which is always safe Democratic, but just went a lot more Democratic this election cycle, and places like Colorado Springs. This is a county that usually votes plus 20 or plus 30 for Republicans. Trump only was able to win Colorado Springs by 11 points. And you even had Garfield County, Colorado, which isn't very big, but was usually a red county. Again, we could go back to 2000. Once a safe red county, Joe Biden actually won narrowly by 2 percentage points. And again, we even have ex-urban counties like Wells County and Douglas County getting a lot more Democratic than they once were. Even though they're still Republican, these are not the margins even close to required to win the state of Colorado. So Donald Trump, the incumbent president who lost the state of Colorado back in 2016 by just 4.8 percentage points, lost it this cycle by 13.5. So Democrats improving their numbers in the state by nearly double, which is really, really fascinating. And it's all due to the Denver suburbs and the Denver metro area. If we go and look at the trends from the 2016 election to the 2020 election, the massive shift is all over Colorado. Even rural counties, a massive, massive shift in favor of the Democrats. There are probably like 10 or so counties that got slightly more Republican, and they were insignificant because these counties have just a few thousand people. All these suburban counties with hundreds of thousands, even maybe nearly 1 million people, are all going really, really heavily Democratic. Fort Collins, a county that tends to vote near the state margin. Hillary Clinton won it by around 5 points. Joe Biden won it by 16, nearly. So, all of these counties, Adams County, plus 8 Democratic this cycle, plus 16, doubling its numbers for Democrats. So Trump even did a lot worse than he did in 2016. At least in 2016, he was able to muster 43% of the vote in the state of Colorado. This time, he was not as lucky. He only got 41.9% of the vote. The fact that a Republican is getting only around 40% of the vote in Colorado in 2020, when this was the state that voted for George W. Bush in 2004, really goes to show you how drastically blue the state of Colorado has gotten. We could also look at the recent Senate race. Republican Cory Gardner lost his re-election bid to John Hickenlooper by around 300,000 votes or 9 percentage points. Now, he did a lot better than Donald Trump did, but in terms of raw percentage, he only overperformed him by around 1% or 2, or 100,000 votes. It was John Hickenlooper that did slightly worse than Joe Biden, and third parties getting a larger share of the vote. But again, Cory Gardner only lost places like Fort Collins and Adams by 14 and 10 respectively. Those are still pretty bad numbers, but they're better than Donald Trump's numbers in the state. Cory Gardner was able to win El Paso County by 16. Trump only won it by 11. Pueblo County stayed Democratic. But really, it was the Denver area that handed the election to Joe Biden and the election to John Hickenlooper. And it's probably going to only continue to trend that way. Colorado is heading in the direction of a state like Oregon, a state like Washington, or even a state like Illinois. You know, the kind of margins we're going to see for Democrats are only going to increase as time goes on if these trends do continue in this direction. And I think it's very likely that they will. Growing areas tend to get more urban and suburban, and those are constituencies that Democrats are doing far better with than they were 10 or 20 years ago. The Denver area is only getting larger, and with that, a higher tendency to vote for Democrats. The area is getting more liberal, less conservative, and the appeal of Republicans, of the fiscally moderate to conservative type is certainly waning in a place like Colorado. Now, Colorado overall is still a fairly fiscally conservative state, kind of like Virginia. That's usually the last element of conservatism to go in a state. If you can call that conservatism, it's really just right-wing economics. But that is probably the last element to go out of the state of Colorado. But it certainly will at the rate that these suburbs are trending more and more blue. If we go back to the 2012 election, Mitt Romney only lost the state by around 5 points, so Trump actually did slightly better than Romney in terms of losing, slightly less than Romney did. And if we look at the Senate race from 2016, Michael Bennet won the state by around 5.6% over his Republican opponent, Darrell Glenn. And he did a lot better in the suburban counties than even Hillary did. So Michael Bennet was able to overperform Trump in a lot of those urban counties. The thing was, there were less third parties in this election, so Darrell Glenn was able to eat up slightly more votes in a place like Denver or Jefferson County than Donald Trump was. If we go to the 2008 election, the state of Colorado went to Barack Obama by around 9%. So again, we went from a state that went +4 Republican to +9, a 14-point shift to the left. John McCain only won Colorado Springs by 20 points in comparison just in 2004, when the last time the state went red. George W. Bush won El Paso County by 34 percentage points. So we go from 34 to 20%. And that number only gets smaller. In 2012, it's only 21% for Mitt Romney in Colorado Springs. In the case of Donald Trump, he does do slightly better, 23%, but then we go down to just, this is Cory Gardner. It's actually only 11% in the case of Donald Trump. And the reason I point out El Paso County is because it's the most populous, consistently voting Republican county in Colorado, and it just keeps getting more and more Democratic, and that's probably not going to change anytime soon. Since it is a growing area, it's getting bluer, the cities are getting bluer, the suburbs are getting bluer, and that's one of the main reasons. And though Cory Gardner overperformed Trump in a suburban county like Colorado Springs and in these other areas, normal Republicans are only probably on a 4-year lag from the margins Trump is about to get. I wouldn't be surprised if your average Republican senator only gets around 41, 42%, the next time a Senate seat is up in Colorado in the 2024 election. 2022, rather. Although that could be interesting because that is an off year, but, in 2026 or whatever, that's going to be a complete blowout, most likely, for the Democrat. If we look at, again, in 2004, A lot of these suburban counties, which are where the population centers are at, and even Denver, are a lot more friendlier to Republicans. Jefferson County going Republican. Again, if we look at today's results, it's safe Democratic. We could look at Adams County, 50 to 48 for George W. Bush. This time plus 16 for Joe Biden. So all of these areas are getting a lot bluer. Weld County going to Bush by a very comfortable margin. Donald Trump only won Weld County in 2020 by around 18 points as opposed to nearly 30. So Colorado continues to get bluer. And the reason for that is the suburbs have been exploding. The suburbs are building up rapidly. There's a lot of immigrants and people from blue states moving into these suburbs and voting the way they did from where they came from, whether it be California, Oregon, Washington, very liberal left-wing places. Those ideas are continuing to be exported to these suburban counties, and this is where the growth is. And Republicans' biggest failure in terms of voter outreach is reaching out to suburban voters and trying to win them back. And that would be the key to winning back a state like Colorado, although I would argue that Colorado is too far gone to turn back red or at least be competitive for Republicans. So that is already some poor news for them. You know, again, just 4 years ago, Republicans were able to keep the state of Colorado competitive. Though it was a lean blue state, it was still competitive. Republicans, in theory, had the chance to win the state. But with a 2020 margin like this, it's nearly impossible. In fact, Colorado voted to the left of New Mexico. New Mexico voted 10.8 percentage points in favor of Joe Biden. Colorado, that number was 13.5. So for the first time, at least in modern history, I think, the state of Colorado has actually voted to the left of the state of New Mexico, which really goes to show you how fast the pace of change is, and that I think Republicans are not going to be able to keep up. You know, Cory Gardner lost his Senate race by 9 points as an incumbent Republican senator with a fairly mediocre approval rating. It might have been underwater by a few points, but that's still a relatively mediocre approval rating. It's not terrible, but it's certainly not good. But to lose by 9 points really does go to show you that this isn't just a rejection of Trump, it's a rejection of Republicans in general. Cory Gardner is the last Republican to win a statewide office in the state of Colorado, at least federally anyway. In the 2014 election, he won over incumbent Mark Udall by around 2 points. Again, this is 99% reporting, so not all of these numbers are accurate. Jefferson County actually did go to Mark Udall, barely. But again, look at these margins in the suburban counties. Gardner is only down by 1 or 2 points. You know, compare that with the 2020 results. Gardner's down 14 points here. He's down nearly 20 points here. Jefferson County, he's down 13 points. You know, so going from only 1 to 2 points in the suburban Denver to, you know, high double digits is an insanely large shift. The only area that's really consistent is Boulder County. But even in Boulder County, he got 27% in 2014, only 23% in 2020. So even in these bluer areas. Now, granted, this was a red wave year. This was the year Republicans took back the Senate, and one of the ways they did that was winning this seat in Colorado. But even with an off year and the Obama backlash, you know, Cory Gardner only won by around 2 points. He unseated an incumbent, which is very impressive. But the margins he got in El Paso County, you know, plus 30 in favor of him, plus 28 in favor of him. These have yet to be replicated. Again, Cory Gardner only won Weld County by 21 points as opposed to nearly 30. He only won Colorado Springs by 16 as opposed to 30. So those are huge shifts. You know, his lead is cut in half in a lot of these counties, and this is what he needs. He only won Fort Collins by less than a point, and in 2020, he lost Fort Collins by 10. So we go from winning by around half a point to losing to 10 points. So this really goes to show you how rapidly changing the state of Colorado is. And this is mainly due to the changing demographics. Colorado is getting more educated, more urban, and overall just more democratic. And Republicans are going to really have a tough time competing with that. I think there's probably going to be a Republican ice age in the state of Colorado for, you know, a decade or so, or a few decades, kind of like what we're seeing in, you know, other safe blue states like New York and California. it's going to take a very long time for Republicans to make the state competitive again, and they would start by trying to win back these suburban counties, because the rural counties isn't going to cut it. You know, these are not vote baskets. These are counties with tens of thousands of people as opposed to millions of people in this area. It's simply not even tenable. It's kind of like a situation you have in my home state of New York, where you have the New York City, which votes overwhelmingly Democratic, but even the urban areas, I mean the rural areas in New York, aren't voting as red as they would need to even make it close to competitive. So we're seeing the same thing play out in the state of Colorado. So really the big takeaway for Republicans here and the overall change in Colorado is that Colorado is gone, essentially, for Republicans. You know, the 2020 election basically confirmed the Colorado rejection of Republican ideals. Colorado always was historically sort of a right-wing libertarian state, favoring a lot of right-wing economics, you know, right-wing on issues like guns and stuff. That's all changed in 2020. It's more of a left-wing libertarian state now, not as friendly to either of those right-wing positions on issues like guns. You know, more gun control is getting passed to the state of Colorado. And that is indicative of, one, the amount of money being spent in the state, which really did help the state turn blue. Democrats put a lot of money and attention into Colorado and hammering the Denver TV market, and it really did work. You know, Michael Bloomberg, big Democratic donors, are putting billions of dollars in the state of Colorado to transform it. And this was something they started to do after the election of George W. Bush in 2002. They started paying more attention because they saw the potential in the state of Colorado. And, you know, nearly 2 decades later, it paid off. Colorado is now a safe Democratic state, along with the likes of Virginia. And it's going to take a very long time for Republicans to come back from this. Even in an off year like 2022 with Michael Bennet up, I think it's very unlikely that is a pickup for them, given how large the margin was. Although you could point to a state like Illinois and say that it is possible. Illinois in 2010 voted for a Republican senator, but it would, if anything, it would be more of the Susan Collins type Republican senator. And I think with the partisan era we're in right now, I really don't think it's going to happen. I really don't think we're going to see those types of results anytime soon. Anyway, guys, that is all for today's video. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos that I put out. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.